Welcome back, everybody, to another reaction video. Well, I am off to Connecticut in the morning, so I'm recording this ahead of time, so you guys will be watching this as I am landing in Connecticut. I'm going there to speak at a school near Fairfield, but I'm also planning on shooting a little bit of original content for the channel. So I'm going to be visiting the Judge's Rock, or Judge's Cave, which is a place that not only do I have a personal connection to, but there's a strong historical connection to, which is the place that several of the regicides, men who were judges and then signed the death warrant of King Charles I, ended up hiding when they had to come to North America to escape being put on trial for their role in the death of the king. So I'll be checking that out, as well as a cemetery packed full of history, including the graves of Eli Whitney and several others. So I'll be bringing that to you very soon. You can also be watching for our next Vicksburg video, which should be coming this week. But for today, we're going to go back to our friends at Yarnhub, one of my favorite channels. I love their work. I love the stories that they tell and the animation they use to do it. So we're going to dive into one of my favorite stories from World War I, which is that of Manfred von Richthofen, a.k.a. the Red Baron. Let's go ahead and dive in.
It's April 1917 in France. Bedraggled souls tangled by wire and sucked down by mud look up to see an epic battle taking place in the heavens. Angels and demons, locked in mortal combat, lifted up on wings of wood, wire and cloth. A great red beast is seen whirling and swooping in the sky. Spitting fire, it is heralded by all sides in equal measures of fear and awe. His name inspires admiration and dread, and it's heard on everyone's lips. A name that holds as much fame and respect now as it did over a century ago. The Red Baron. The Red Baron. The Red Baron.
Also one of the best Sabaton songs.
Von Richthofen was born on the 2nd of May 1892 into a noble Prussian family. He was the eldest son. At the age of 11, he started his military training in the Cadet Corps, where he became known for his fearlessness.
So yeah, he was born in Prussia. And remember, the borders of these countries have changed over time. And Prussia is one of the constituent states. It's the largest constituent state of the German Empire. But good chunks of what was then Prussia is now today in Poland. And that includes the Red Baron's birthplace, which is now in Poland.
He excelled at sports. He was a skilled horseman and enjoyed all the outdoor pursuits. At the age of 17, he joined the German cavalry unit as an officer and was assigned to No. 3 Squadron. As hostilities broke out in 1914, Richthofen served as a cavalry reconnaissance officer. Due to the nature of combat at the time, the unit was forced to abandon their horses and instead were serving as dispatch runners and telephone operators.
Yeah, so think about it. War breaks out. Still pretty conventional in terms of war, right? You know, beginning of the war, you are kind of bridging that 18th into the 19th into the 20th century, where you have cavalry and infantry primarily, and now you're into the age of artillery and trench warfare and gas attacks, and now airplanes. And so the cavalry very quickly becomes obsolete on these battlefields. There's a time and a place where cavalry can still be effective, but not on the Western Front where there's trench warfare. And, you know, there's just not really a place for that. And so a guy who wants to fight, he's looking for something else, and that becomes the sky.
Bored and frustrated, he decided his calling was in the air after seeing the German military aircraft. Unable to contain his eagerness and frustration, he applied to the Imperial German Army Air Service. In his application, he wrote, "I have not gone to war in order to collect cheese and eggs." He was accepted, and in May 1915, he joined the flying service. Initially, he was to be in the observer's seat. That still didn't stop him from getting involved in the fight, engaging with a fireman over the French lines. He met the German air ace Oswald Bolker.
So he gets his very first victory. So don't really want to use the word kills, because very often the men that were shot down in these aerial victories survive. So it's not about killing the pilot. It's about taking down the aircraft. In fact, I think, I don't want to put myself in their mindset, but I think by and large, they probably were perfectly fine with the pilot they were shooting at surviving if they took out the aircraft. So he takes down an aircraft. It's his first aerial victory, but he doesn't get credit for it because aerial victories had to be verified. and they weren't able to verify this particular one because it went down behind their own lines.
And that meeting inspired him. He eagerly entered training as a pilot in October 1915. Richthofen wasn't the most accomplished trainee by a long way. He struggled and was considered a below-average pilot and even crashed on his first solo flight.
Imagine.
After a time, though, his skills grew, and he became an accomplished pilot in the Kampfgeschwader 2, No. 2 Squadron, flying a two-seater Albatros. Richthofen got himself noticed and was recruited by Bolka to join the newly formed Jagdstaffel or Jasta 2.
So one of the really fascinating things about aerial warfare in World War I is how quickly the technology is changing. Remember, the Wright brothers, who may or may not have been the first to fly, as with all inventions, there are a number of people who can lay claim to those inventions. And at about the same time the Wright brothers were doing their thing down at Kitty Hawk, there were others who were also achieving similar success. It's just the Wright brothers were better at getting the word out that they had done it and better at getting the claim on it, things like that. Kind of like Thomas Edison did with the light bulb. But the technology is, this has been 1917 is 14 years. It's 1903. So 11 years between the Wright brothers in late 1903 and the beginning of World War I. And so the technology changes so many times as people start really working on. So what he starts with is not the plane he ends up with, and multiple times they change planes throughout.
Jasta 2 was an incubator for Germany's top flying talent. Its commander, Bolka, was a supreme aerial tactician and a hero in the eyes of the German public. He was ahead of his time, and his dictates formed the foundation of modern aviation battle tactics. He drilled them into the entire Jasta, and Richthofen's victories began to rack up. Try to secure advantages before attacking. If possible, keep the sun behind you. Always carry through an attack.
And why do you keep the sun behind you? Because if you're coming in out of the sun, people can't see you. And any advantage you can get to buy yourself some time and get the drop on the guy is going to help.
When you've started it, fire only at close range, and only when your opponent is properly in your sights.
Don't waste ammo.
Always keep your eye on your opponent, and never let yourself be deceived by ruses. In any form of attack, it is essential to assail your enemy from behind. If your opponent dives on you, do not try to evade his onslaught, but fly to meet it. When over the enemy's lines, never forget your own line of retreat. For the squadron, attack on principle in groups of 4 or 6. When the fight breaks up into a series of single combats, take care that several do not go for the same opponent. Richthofen received the Blue Max in January 1917 after his 16th confirmed victory. That same month he was given command of his own squadron, the Jasta 11. It was at this time that he was inspired to take the daring move to paint his aircraft bright red. In his own words, "For whatever reasons, one fine day I came upon the idea of having my crate painted glaring red. The result was that absolutely everyone could not help but notice my red bird. My opponents also seemed to be not entirely unaware."
See, by this point, he's already probably well known for being one of the best out there. He's already got close to 20 aerial victories. It's a really fascinating time in warfare. In a lot of ways, you could argue that the pilots were the knights of their time. There was a certain chivalry that went along with this. There was a certain level of respect that existed even between enemies who recognized the talent and ability and the greatness of their opponents, to the point where, for example, when Theodore Roosevelt's son is killed, he's an American pilot. He's killed. He's shot down behind enemy lines. The Germans give him a very respectful funeral, and they do the same. The Allies do for the Red Baron when he is shot down. So him doing this, they very quickly would have known who he was. And see, now my thinking is, I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, I'm painting a target on myself, because now it's going to be really easy for people to know it's me, and they're all going to go after me. But it also could work the other way, to where there's an intimidation factor there, and it ends up not just being him. His whole squadron ends up with these bright colors. They end up calling them the Flying Circus.
The Red Barons and his squadron's success came in April 1917, where he had 22 confirmed victories, including 4 in a single day. In June, he was given command of JG-1, which included several squadrons, including Yaster 11. JG-1 became famously known as the Flying Circus due to its bright painted planes and the supporting tents and caravans that formed the mobile camp. On July 6, 1917, Richthofen was hit, causing partial blindness. His aircraft fell into a spin, and he just managed to regain control and land in friendly territory. After several operations, and against doctor's orders, he went back to active service within 3 weeks.
So he takes this break during this time, and I believe, I'll have to double check this, but I'm fairly certain his brother, Lothar, I think was his name, takes over command of the squadron in his absence. Now, eventually when the Red Baron's killed, I believe the man who takes over for him is actually Hermann Goering, who was an ace pilot himself.
The injury caused him repeated issues, including headaches and nausea, and changed his mood and temperament, which became darker.
And I believe that this is the beginning of the end for him, and I'll talk a little bit at the end about my theories about why he got killed the way he did, because it was some very out-of-character things that he did. But I'll talk about that at the end.
Forced to take convalescence due to these problems in the late summer, during which time he wrote, "I am in wretched spirits after every aerial combat. I believe that the war is not as the people at home imagine it, with a hurrah and a roar. It's very serious, very grim." Despite his health issues, he continued to rack up multiple victories. On April the 20th, 1918, Richthofen, in his Red Fokker triplane, spotted and attacked 2 Sopwith camels. Richthofen loved to duel with the English. He said, "The French attacking spirit is like bottled lemonade. It lacks tenacity. The Englishmen, on the other hand, one notices that they are of Germanic blood. Sportsmen easily take to flying, and Englishmen see in flying nothing but a sport." Dispatching both British planes within a short time, he racked up his 79th and 80th victories. He had one more day of flying before he was due to go on leave. His mother had been imploring the Kaiser to remove Germany's top air ace from active service. Richthofen took off on the morning of April the 21st, 1918. It was the flight that would bring his career and life to an end. He spotted a Sopwith camel and gave chase. This time, it seems, he may not have realized he was behind enemy lines while chasing the Sopwith at very low altitude. At the time, due to wind conditions and the moving of the front lines, he uncharacteristically continued the chase too far. Whether the shot came from a plane or from the ground is open to debate. In the last moments of his life, he managed to make a rough landing in a field north of the village of Vaux-sur-Somme. Several Australian servicemen rushed up to the downed triplane to hear the Red Baron's last words.
Kaput.
Kaput. The Red Baron was treated with great respect and was interred with full military honours by the personnel of No. 3 Squadron, Australian Flying Corps. Allied squadrons stationed nearby came to pay their respects. Memorial wreaths were laid, one of which was inscribed with the words, "To our gallant and worthy foe."
I don't think it was an accident. This is just my personal opinion. I don't really have a lot to back this up. It just was very uncharacteristic. A lot of people said he was acting different after he was injured, dealing with headaches, dealing with depression very clearly. I think it was a suicide mission. It was his last mission before he was going to take leave. He might have thought this was his last time in combat. I think he knew exactly where he was, that he was too low, that he was over enemy lines, and this was not a mistake that he commonly made. And I think the evidence is pretty conclusive that he was taken down by an Australian machine gunner. There's debate about which Australian machine gunner, but I think all of the evidence that I've seen pretty well conclusively proves that being the case. So I honestly, my personal opinion is that it was on purpose. It's still amazing. He was shot through the heart, the lungs, still managed to bring the plane down somewhat intact, mostly intact before dying. But yeah, incredible. Let's take a look at a list of some of the other aces of World War I. So first of all, it's important to note that different countries have different ways of tabulating what they consider to be an aerial victory. So for France, for example, French victory confirmation standards were strict. Credit was given only for the destruction of an enemy aircraft, and the destruction had to be witnessed by an independent witness, such as an artillery observer, an infantryman, or another pilot. The victories certified generally fell into 4 categories of destruction. An enemy aircraft independently witnessed falling in flames, 1 witnessed crashing to earth, 1 independently witnessed disintegrating while in flight, or an enemy aircraft falling into captivity behind the battle lines of the French or their allies. Probable victories would not count on a pilot's score, although they would be noted. Examples of probable victories could be an enemy aircraft falling out of control but not seen to impact. So that's the French, for example. Now, let's look at the Central Powers. And they didn't use the term ace, but referred to German pilots who had achieved 10 kills as a big gun. That was how they referred to them, and publicized their names and scores for the benefit of civilian morale. This term is not known to have come into use before May 1916, however, as when a pilot before that time achieved a total of 4 confirmed victories, they were most likely to start being cited in official Army communiques. As mentioned previously, the German military's verification methods for scoring a confirmed aerial victory were rigorous, and became more so later in the war. By 1916, as the dedicated Jasta fighter squadrons were formed within the newly named Luftstreitkraft, in 1916, every victory had to be claimed in a combat report to his commanding officer. This report was passed up the chain of command for evaluation, so at any point somebody could have nixed it. Downed enemy aircraft that landed behind German lines of trench work were easily confirmed. Those that fell behind enemy lines had to be verified by an observer. All victories were credited to a single specific pilot. If there's a disagreement, the victory would be credited to a unit, but not an individual. So let's take a look then at some of the flying aces that had over 20 during the war. And of course, Manfred von Richthofen is number 1 with 80. You have a French ace, what was right behind him with 75. And there's not a guy that you think you hear about a whole lot. Billy Bishop from the Canadians had 72. And of course, these guys all survived. The UK, James McCudden, who was shot down, or who died during the war. I don't know how he died. Your top American is going to be Eddie Rickenbacker. And the Americans you're going to see are way down the list, and there's a couple of reasons for that. Number one, of course, being that the Americans were only in the last couple of years of the war, but also Americans had a policy where once a guy got so many kills, and this was true in World War II as well, they would move them out of combat and into a command position or in some other position where they might not have been in that place. And Eddie Rickenbacker, despite what you hear about Alvin York and others, Eddie Rickenbacker is by far the most decorated American from the First World War. He gets the Medal of Honor. He gets something like 7 or 8 Distinguished Service Crosses. It's just a ridiculously high number. He's buried down in Columbus, Ohio. We'll talk about him sometime. But here's Eddie Rickenbacker right here. He's the top American with 26 confirmed kills. So he's way, way down the list compared to a lot of folks. But 7 Distinguished Service Crosses, Medal for Merit, Legion of Honor, Croix de Guerre from France. Just some really interesting stuff. Let me know your thoughts. We'll definitely talk about some of the aces of World War II sometime as well. Use the comment section below, and we will see you again real soon. Thanks for watching.